The illustrious Jabba bids you welcome. I'm going to regret this.
I'm Pete Mitchell. He's Peyton Jones. And this is the Church Planter Podcast, brought to you by Church Planter Magazine. Hey, Church Planter, this is Pete Mitchell.
And this is Peyton Jones.
And you are lucky enough to have tuned into what could possibly be the best episode of the Church Planter Podcast.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. You know, Pete, I got a...
But here's the reason why it's the best. It's not really you and me talking.
That's so true. You know what? I guess because I took a break from hardcore, or maybe it's because I was traveling. I don't remember. I think we did something kind of like this for one of our episodes. I had a guy from South America write me and say, "Hey, are you and Pete okay? You know, is everything all right? I haven't heard from you guys normally in a while."
Dude, the best was, okay, so we've got a thing called the Bible Inner Circle, which you're actually going to hear about today a little bit, from an insider's perspective. And, one of the guys in there, so we do, 2 mastermind calls a month. And so this last one we had was, the very first Saturday of the month. So what was that? Like last week or something like that?
Mm.
And, so one of the new guys in the Bible Inner Circle, he goes, "Hey, my question is this, you guys didn't have a Church Planter podcast release this week. What's going on?" So I'm like, well, I don't know if you heard this, but, Peyton's mom is sick and not doing that well. And in fact, he had to have his last conversation with her on the phone. And, so he was out of town. And do you feel guilty yet about harassing us about not having the Church Planter podcast? And he goes, "No."
That's rad.
And I'm like, okay, then you're one of us.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. So we should actually tell them what we got in store for them today, because we actually don't have much time for Smack Talk. I added it up, and it's like, about 60 minutes of coolness that we're going to release.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. If you guys are new to our podcast, what we normally do is we kind of screw around a bunch and do this thing called Smack Talk. And I was talking to Brandon Brooks, our old friend. He's a actor in Hollywood, and he's a faithful listener, but he was like, "Man, I wouldn't change a thing." He goes, "I just think you need to warn new people, because I don't think they know what in the heck they've just walked into." The other funny thing is this week I had someone write me in, and I had a phone call with them yesterday, and they're starting a church planting podcast, and they just wanted some advice. And so really cool guys, and I know one of the guys and really respect him. So I was like, "Yeah, man, let's talk." Always happy to help the competition. I'm teasing. It was funny because he started off, he asked me, he said, "Hey, I need some pointers." And I was like, "Look, man, we're probably not the people you want to ask, because I do this to help church planners, and so does Pete. But that's only half the story. The other half, and the reason the episode's broken up like it is because we're also just doing this for us."
Yes,
right?
That's totally it. Or like,
so look, if you want to find guys that do, the marketing research, and I mean, our podcast is huge, but, if you want to find guys that are trying to really be successful, that's their goals, to be the biggest, I know guys who are out there following all those rules, and maybe you should talk to them. And he goes, "No," he goes, "those podcasts, they're not like your podcast." And he goes, he goes, "You guys have hit on something by just being real guys." He goes, and I told him, I said, "That's the funny thing, is that when we bump into people, they immediately start joking around with us. So it's not like, hello, Peyton, that's all nervous." And I mean, we've had people, you got your story about people being nervous, but
I thought that was the best. Andrew was applying to come into the business growth consulting course, and I'm on the phone with him and his wife, and he goes, I just got to let you know, I'm really nervous right now because, I listened to the podcast and I'm talking to a celebrity. I'm like, A celebrity. Oh man, I feel sorry for you.
It's so funny, man, because the reality is we actually, this is our normal reaction. We meet somebody and they immediately just want to like have smack talk with us.
Dude, when we meet someone, my first thought is, oh crap, are they mad at me? Like literally that's the first thought that I have is, oh, how did I offend this person?
I was up in Burbank at the NAM Los Angeles assessment, and it covers a good kind of chunk of Southern Cal. And so people were from kind of all over SoCal there. And I was getting it. We were doing some films. We were doing some training films for assessors. And when I turned around, we were clearing out of the room, and the marriage and family therapist guy was coming in. And, you know, I said something just, you know, kind of funny as we're on our way out, something completely inappropriate, I'm sure. And he looks over and he goes, "It is so funny to be having a conversation with you right now." He goes, "I'm used to hearing your voice. Having like your voice come out of like a living body, like a real person, living tissue." He goes, "It's so weird. It's just surreal." And he was just laughing. And so we started joking around. I realized that, you know, he's listening to the podcast, but that's kind of the reaction is normally people want to goof off. And I dig that, man. Cause
one of my favorites,
what church planning is.
One of my
You're
favorites,
not around anyone who's impressed with you. You're literally just around people who don't know who in the heck you are. And that's where I'm in my element, man.
Yeah.
I feel better. Like I've got people coming over Saturday night. They don't have any clue that I'm an author. You know, they're not impressed that I'm on a podcast. They're just people.
I wouldn't be impressed either if you listen to this podcast.
They wouldn't hang out with us if they listen to this.
I think the best is, Tyrone, formerly known as White Tyrone. Every time I talk to him on the phone, he's like, "Man, I'm just so used to listening to you at 2 times speed. Can you please talk faster?"
Yeah. So those of you guys that don't know, so we have this Voxer group, and this is what we're going to play for you today. Pete will intro it way better than me, but we have people that talk really slow on it. So we learned that there was like a 1, 2, and 3 times speed,
and 4 times,
and a 4. And there is maybe 2 people
yes.
on Voxer that I know of that they require a 4 times speed, because they also happen to leave like 4 or 5 minute long messages. And that adds up after a while.
It
so,
does.
You know, if you can take it down to 1 minute, it's great. But then they sound kind of like normal speed when you put them on 4. But then there's other people. So like Barry Waters, you can't put Barry even on double speed.
I find that funny. You're absolutely right. And I thought it was because of his Welsh accent, which is so slight. But I was like, dude, I can't speed him up.
Wales.
Is that what it is?
Very fast.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody who's got an accent, I can't, like, cause here's the thing, guys. We've got this thing called Bivo Inner Circle, and you're going to hear today on the podcast, part of our Voxer group, because it was so on fire. I was like, we have to use this as a podcast. So the Bivo Inner Circle was originally started as a way where Peyton and I could really invest more time and energy into, wait for it, bivocational pastors. Hence Bivo Inner Circle. So most of what we've got this thing called the Voxer chat group. So Voxer is an app on your iPhone, your Android, or your desktop computer. And we've got a private chat where everyone who's in the program is in the private chat, and you're able to hit a button and you can push to talk. Think of it as like voicemail on demand, where you can all hear each other's messages. So guys will be in there, "Hey, you know what? Here's a problem that I got. Does somebody have any suggestions for this?" And other guys will chime in with an answer. And most of the time it's business related, because they're all coming through either my business growth consulting course, my social media consulting course, or we just actually launched a new program, how to create an online training program that benefits pastors and or the church. So, you know, we've got people that are, the primary reason they joined was for that, right? They're bivocational, and they're like, how can I make more money? And what it's kind of grown to, in fact, I got a message this morning. So you can, you know, voice message in, you can actually video in, or you can type, like texting into the group. And so guys do all 3 based on where they're at, because they're bivocational. Some guys might be working a job, and so they can't speak into it. So they'll type a message in, stuff like that. And one of the guys actually texted me this morning, in a private chat, and he's like, hey, you know what? I thought this was going to be all about business, but I realized God's using this for so much more. And he's like, for some guys, this is a place of healing. For other guys, this is like the only group of people where they can share what's actually going on in their lives.
Yep.
Because yesterday we had some deep conversations going on. One of the pastors was like, guys, there's no one else I can really go to. So I'm coming to you guys. Here's what's going on in my family. I need some prayer and some advice. And then you just see the pastors, man, just stepping up. And you guys know this. If you are a pastor or a church planner, you know how rare it is to be able to have someone who you can kind of like let behind the curtain, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes it's hard with people on your staff. Sometimes the problems might be with someone on your staff, and you're like, who can I talk to about this problem? But it's one of those things where this thing has literally taken on a life of its own. And when we have people join the Bible Inner Circle, I'm like, look, if you're not going to get on the Voxer group, you're really not going to understand how powerful this thing is. Mm. And I'm like, it was almost like an afterthought when we were putting together the program, and it has become like the linchpin of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So let me just set this up, Peyton, and then you can say whatever you want to say. So what we're going to play for you guys are the voice message section. Ed Choi, one of the guys in my business growth consulting course, he's known as the wedding pastor. So he's actually putting together and about ready to launch a program showing pastors, here's how you can create additional income being a wedding pastor, and how he uses it to reach the unchurched in his community. And it just so happens to pay him because he's doing their wedding. So it's kind of a win-win there. And so he throws out to the group the other day, he goes, hey guys, why are you a bivocational pastor? I'm really looking for some insight so I can put this on. He does a thing called Wedding Wednesdays on Facebook Live. And I'm telling you, man, the conversations from there were just unbelievable. Mm. They were so good. I was texting Peyton. Peyton was on a train. I'm like, dude, are you listening to the Voxer group? Like, this is amazing. And I'm like, okay, we gotta share this. So understand this. There are some messages that are way too private. And so you need to be a part of Bible Inner Circle because it's not for the public. It's private. Like, we had a lot of stuff go on yesterday with one of the people who's really hurting, and that's private. If you're not in the Bible Inner Circle, that's not for you at all.
Not only that, it was funny because, part of what the Bible Inner Circle does is it gives you access to not only Pete and I, all day, but it also gives you access to the network. And I literally felt like I do it when I'm planning a church. I used to tell my church, hey, if you're not in a small group, don't come to me with a pastoral issue, because if this works right, most of your pastoral issues get worked out in your small group, and I'm there for the big stuff. And what happens in this group yesterday, I'm listening to one of the problems, and everybody fed in. I literally, at the end of that, there was so much wisdom in this group speaking into this guy's life. I literally just came on and quoted a few of them and said, I have nothing to add.
You did. You did.
Yeah. It was like, these are exactly the things I would have pointed out. It was rich, man. And it's so much richer because it's that wisdom found in the multitude of counselors that, quite frankly, leaders never get.
Yeah.
It's special, man. We did not expect it to become this.
Right.
We didn't know it was going to turn into this.
We won't take up any more of your time because you're going to get a lot of great stuff out of this. So what's going to happen is we've actually pieced together all the different clips, and every once in a while you'll notice, hey, I don't understand what he's referring to, because it could have been someone texted in a message and someone was responding to the text message. Obviously, we can't play that on a podcast. So all you're getting are the voicemail pieces. You won't necessarily know who they are unless they say what their name is. We know who they are because it shows up in the Voxer chat group, who's saying, leaving the message. But it doesn't matter. Like, you're going to get so much out of this. I actually think, if you are a bivocational pastor or a full-time pastor, or on staff at a church who's thinking, how do we do church planning and stuff like that, I would almost make listening to this particular episode of the podcast mandatory because they address a lot of the issues that pastors are going through, whether they are full-time ministry pastors or bivocational pastors. And so I'm really excited to bring this one to you guys and would just encourage you to definitely listen to it all the way through because you're going to get a ton out of it. If you want to know about joining the Bivo Inner Circle, you can head on over to bivoinnercircle.com and we've got some webinars and stuff. I think eventually we'll have to actually make a page that breaks out what the Bivo Inner Circle is. Right now, I know if you head on over to bivoinnercircle.com, you're going to see the webinar offering one of our business growth programs. And everything is built around the Bivo Inner Circle. It's really hard to explain until you watch the webinar. So just go watch the webinar and then you'll understand it. But anything else you want to add to that, Peyton, before we just kick that off?
Only that today's episode is also brought to you by reachingtheunreachedbook.com, which, by the way, this is kind of funny. My wife was making fun of me last night, and she was like, how's the book doing? And I said, it's actually doing really good. It's number one in church growth and number one in evangelism, but she laughed that it was number one in church growth.
That is kind of funny. So anyway, Peyton had to jump off the phone real quick. He had an emergency call come in. So anyway, this episode's also, as he said, being brought to you by reachingtheunreachedbook.com. You can head on over to Amazon and you can actually just look up Peyton Jones or Reaching the Unreached. It'll absolutely come up. Phenomenal book. Go ahead and pick that up. And anyway, enjoy this episode of the Church Planter Podcast.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys are all having a fabulous Tuesday. It's always a great Tuesday on my end because Tuesday is family night, and which means Chick-fil-A. So I'm gearing up for Chick-fil-A. And as those of you who know about Chick-fil-A know, there's just never a bad day when you have Chick-fil-A. So anyway, I digress. So some of you know that I've been doing a weekly Facebook Live video, kind of ramping up, getting ready for my webinar. And so I'm thinking about doing something a little bit different the next 2 weeks. I was inspired by a podcast that I listened to put together kind of, I don't know, almost like an authoritative, that's not the right word, but almost like an authority blog post on being bivocational. So Pete, I don't remember if you have a blog or not, if you write. But I would love to connect with you. I would love to put you in the Bivo group and everything that you do as one of the core resources on that, as well, of course, as the Wedding Pastors Network. But here's my question for all of you. Would you all be willing to just really briefly, I feel like I just sat on something that was wet. Would you just briefly answer this question? Why are you bivocational? And what benefit has being bivocational brought to your personal life and your ministry? If you could answer that just briefly. Tomorrow, on my video tomorrow, I think what I'm going to do is I'm not going to do the webinar format because I feel like I've just kind of been doing the same thing week after week, which is fine, but I'm going to take a little different twist on it. And I think what I'm going to do is mainly talk about my top 10 reasons for being bivocational and why it's a great option. It's not for everybody. And then I would love to share your answer.
Hey, Ed, just going to answer your question about why Bivo for me. I know some people do Bivo because they want to get around lost people and what have you. It's never been an issue for me. My wife and I actually have more lost friends than we do saved friends, probably. So for me, the Bivo really is strictly about the money and not to get controversial or anything, but the real reason I guess you could say why I'm Bivo is because most Christians don't tithe or give regularly, because if most of them did, we'd never have to take an offering and I wouldn't have to work another job. But so there's my 2 cents. But also, there is the benefit of you get to meet a different segment of people. But for me, it's really about the fact that the full-time ministry just doesn't pay that well in most cases, unless you're a megachurch pastor. Nothing against them, but there it is.
Hey, Ed, I'll chime in too. Similar to Wyman, but not exactly the same, because I think for someone like me who was already a professional, already in a different stage in life, kids with braces and private school and mortgage payments and all that stuff, before you felt called to plant a church, that there really just is no other option. I just wouldn't even feel right, even if I could raise that kind of money to support myself. It would take years to do that, first of all, and second of all, it's just not very practical. So for those called later in life who already have an established life, Bivo gives you an opportunity to minister and even plant churches in ways that normal traditional church planting models that require fundraising and all that kind of stuff just don't do. Okay, see you.
And Ed, just another quick follow-up point to that is part of the reason I'm Bivo is because I don't want to be limited in what I can do in ministry based on what the church can pay me. So I'd love to get to a point where it doesn't matter if or what the church can pay me, that I'm available and able to do whatever they need me to do.
Hey, Ed and everyone. Wyman, Charlie, I appreciate your contributions to this question. I appreciate the question, first of all. I was looking back in my Facebook page, and I was looking at the church planner page that Pete set up back, earlier in the year, late last year. And I remember writing a post on there, and I went back and I pulled it up and I read it, and I actually listened to it. I'm driving, and I cut out a segment of it. I was going to post here so you could just have it for print. But I think what it really gets at is to say in this moment is that I am a bivocational church planter because I believe that this is the model that God gives us in how to live incarnationally with the people that we're called to minister to. That because of the professionalism that has really become what people consider the clergy or the church, that ministers have been detached from the common man in everyday life, because as they have seen us and perceived us to be lofty and detached from them. Now, in the Black community, in the Black church, the pastor has 98% of the time been bivocational. It's only within the last maybe 30 years that you've really seen, maybe 30 years, you've seen predominant number of Black pastors becoming full-time. That's like in the Black church, that was something that was like, the golden grail, so to speak. That's it. When you got to that point, that's right after or just as symbolic as burning the mortgage to the church. And it would usually take a lifetime almost of a pastor's service to get to that point of cultivating a ministry. Now it's a lot more common, but in that commonality has become even still this detachment from society, where we see the breakdown in the culture today. So being bivocational is something that I've always known that I would have to probably be a part of. Even before we were married, my wife and I discussed living a nominal way of life that we would not be a burden on a church. And then after, becoming into this place, and I actually, to be honest with you, my article is kind of like pushing back against it with Pete because, I look at it from different perspectives. It's not like something that I saw that we should be striving to do. I saw it as something that in the Black church particularly, one of the reasons that our society is so broken, our culture is so broken, is because we've been taken out of, our faith has become misplaced. So I saw the church really becoming called to take care of the pastor and take care of the people the way that they're supposed to, because even though it was never really part of the narrative, it needed to be, and I was pushing it, trying to force it to be, so to speak, or rather just very frustrated with it because I saw that it wasn't. So now but now my embracing of it is more of a theological, ontological perspective, where I believe that we're called to live it out, to walk it out amongst the people, rubbing shoulders with them as David smelled like the sheep, and being able to go through life on life's terms without this this air of I'm not saying it right, but you know what I'm talking about, because that's the perception that has been cultivated in society. That's why pastors get very, very little street cred or social cred now. They've lost that for the most part. Once you say Reverend so and so, or Minister so and so, or Pastor so and so, someone gave it a air of respect. Now, you'd be treated like that European dude when Mr. Trump walked by him, gripped him up and moved him out the way. So that's why being bivocational is important to me. But that speaks to why this group is also very important, because this is what my article also speaks to, my post. What Pete has actually been able to create, Ian Peyton, is a response to that in a very balanced, nuanced, and relevant way. Financially sound tools that we can use practically to lift our families out of poverty and to be confidently who we are. Just a side note, I wasn't going to share this part with you, but it kind of speaks to it a little bit. I was interacting with the radio owner earlier this morning, and he made a very offhanded remark to me, very disrespectful, and I knew where it was coming from. But what happened, what I was so pleased about, was how I did not internalize any of what he said. I because of how Pete has actually helped me to see myself in a much more valuable way. I didn't let it rub me one bit, because in his mind, he thought that because I'm a minister or a pastor, I wasn't worthy of his respect. So he was letting me know, what the deal was. I was like, okay, all right, but can we meet next week to do my recording for my interview for your radio program? That's all I want to know. Okay, so that's all, guys. Just great question. Thanks for asking it.
So I'm going to agree with a lot of what David said, but not nearly as eloquently. But we are planting here bivocationally, and I can't tell you what a difference it's made to be able to introduce myself as the technician at Capitol Macintosh, not, I'm here to start a church, or I'm a church planter. When I've led with that kind of statement of we're going to start a church, it's amazing to see people immediately tune you out, shut you out. But by being able to say I'm a technician at Capitol Macintosh, or hopefully soon a social media growth consultant, it opens up the conversation and you actually get to know the person. And so it's been great to extend relationships being bivocational, to get into places that I never would get before. So that's the other thing my job has so far has provided a lot of opportunities to meet people and develop relationships with people that would have been a lot harder, I think, if I would have been fully supported, or just being a full-time pastor. I know from being a full-time worship pastor how that changes you. Another reason is it gives credibility to what we're doing. We're not doing this because we're getting paid for it. We're doing this because this is what Jesus has called us to do. And I'm not calling any other Christian to live missionally, that I'm not doing it. You should live missionally. You should witness to your coworkers and people around you. But I'm going to sit here in my church office and study my sermon all week. No, I'm doing it too, and I'm struggling with it too. And so I'm not going to lead you, tell you to do something that I'm not doing myself. And we can actually lead people by example, by being bivocational. I think the other reason for us is one of our core values is give sacrificially, and we are actually trying to help people learn to give sacrificially, not just to the church. In fact, sometimes not to the church at all, but to those in need. And so we're trying to do everything that we possibly can to reduce church expenses. We don't want to own a building. If we don't have full-time staff, then we can actually give more of our money to the community and to help people in need, because we don't have the expenses as a church. And so that's another reason for us to be bivocational. There was one other thing that was going through my mind that Now I forgot, but those are some of the reasons why I am bivocational, why I want to stay bivocational, and so I hope that helps you out. I just remembered the last thing. Part of our organizational model is to be a multiplying network of communities rather than just a single location, single Sunday service kind of church. And by being bivocational and not having the goal of let's amass enough people, giving enough to bring me on full time, it's another way to kind of force us to continue to multiply and develop multiple leadership. Is for me to continue to stay bivocational and have our other leaders be bivocational also. So it spreads the leadership load. Whereas if my goal is to become full-time where I can lead and I can do everything, or whoever else the other pastors and leaders are, that I think that kind of stunts multiplication of leadership. And so staying bivocational, even having other leaders be bivocational, I can't do it all. I don't have time to do it all. I'm working full time. I'm doing all this. And so I need other leaders to help me out. And so it kind of forces us to multiply too. So that's another reason.
Aaron, this is for you. Two things. One, bless you, brother. Three things. But one, your demonstrations of graceful living, where you're doing things and you're redeeming parts of the community that are broken by extending gracious gifts of love to them. That's truly at the root of our missional presence. And that's what's really going to be the only thing, the power that redeems these places we live and minister to, especially more that we see other religious institutions that are very law-oriented escalating. The second thing is, brother, to your platform, I really love the way you put that it kind of like, it's indicative to create leadership because of the necessity of leadership, because you can't do it all, right? So I just wanted to ask you this one question, right? So how's that working for you? Love you, man.
Hey guys, I wanted to chime in again on the why Bivo thing, and I wanted to throw something out there. I'm definitely not trying to stir anything or be the controversial one in the group, but I think the key comes to, being in your lane and what you're called to do. And I think, some people are called to be full-time in the world. Some people are called to be a doctor and go preach the gospel to other doctors. And some are called to be bivo and be in both worlds. But I think some are called to full-time ministry and better operate in that. And it's come where almost it seems like not specifically this group, but in general, there's this trend almost to say that there's something wrong with being in full-time ministry, and where like it's a handicapped or something not to have a secular job. And I just want to say, man, I don't think it matters as much where you are, as long as you are doing what God's put before you. And I think the key is to be aware and to do the most with the opportunities God puts in front of you, man, because he's going to give every one of us opportunities to share the gospel every day, whether it be in a secular environment, a church environment, what have you. And I think of Jesus with the woman at the well, when he sent his disciples into town to go get food. And they come back and he says, all you did is get food? He goes, I sent you in there and the harvest was ripe and you missed it. And he tells them, lift up your eyes. It's an interesting study to do a study on that phrase in the Bible. But he's telling them, man, lift up your eyes. The harvest is ripe. And I think that's the key, is to lift up our eyes and see what God is putting before us and where the opportunity is. But I do think that there is also benefit to, full-time ministry, because I find for myself, the more time I can spend away from not tied up in secular work, the more I can be fruitful and productive in the ministry. That's just me. I know everybody's not that way. But for me, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I'm probably not doing any more secular work, but I'm still doing ministry at my church, And for many, many years, the ministry was just a labor of love. I've worked for close to nothing. I've worked for nothing. full time in the ministry. So I've been Bivo almost my entire life. So this is not something against Bivo, but I just want to be careful that we don't try to take it too far the other way and almost make it like there's something wrong with full-time ministry. Now, I'm not talking about these, some pastors that maybe take exorbitant salaries and things like that. But most of us here are here because we don't want a full-time traditional 40-hour-a-week work week. We're looking for something that we can do in less time so we can have more time for the ministry. Anyway, man, I'm not trying to be controversial or stir something up, but just kind of another side of the coin, and just felt like sharing some thoughts.
Hey, David again. I just want to respond to Wyman. Wyman, I receive your observations in love. I do, and I understand exactly what you're saying, and I support what you're saying wholeheartedly. Depending on what side of the fence you're standing on, man, I think you're absolutely right. That we need to be cautious and use wisdom in how we promote any position that we call to promote in conjunction with the mandate to promote the gospel. Preach the gospel, not promote it, but preach it. But I'm reminded of a conversation a friend of mine put on Facebook today about he took a young man into the bank to open a bank account, and he was rejected because he had I think he was flagged for having 3 closed accounts within a period of 3 years, something like that. And a lot of people were coming on saying how they understood that the banking system has these regulations in place to protect themselves and protect their shareholders and things like that. And I just thought it was odd how when I tried to communicate, I actually erased my post by accident, was that people that make regulations and people who make policies, many times they're looking at those policies without really taking into consideration the impact it'll have on everybody else, especially those people who aren't necessarily in their purview or in their sphere of relationships. And usually those are people who are caught up and most negatively impacted by those policies. I'm just thinking about that because the first thought I thought of, it's actually the second thought I thought of after I really walked through your observations, was how I think one of my, I don't want to call it a complaint, let's call it a criticism of full-time ministry has become developed over the years of having that group of pastors become very resistant and antagonistic towards church planters. Not just myself, but others, where it's almost like, we're viewed as the pariah, the guy, the girl, the woman who's just being a troublemaker, doesn't want to play along with everybody else, want to do their own thing. And they've taken an unbiblical stance. And some of it, mostly of it, because they've tried to maintain their own sense of influence or power, or even revenue source. I'm very pragmatic when it comes to this stuff, because I look at it and I try to be as well balanced as I can, as I try to be with this. I'm always trying to see what my blind spots is. Of course, as I saw your observation was, and I appreciated it, and I receive it, and I will. And I did not take it as a personal directed towards me at all. And I just realized that there's a reason why I believe this group has been put together. And divinely, I believe there's a reason why God is doing this in our country amongst the Western church, because of the failings and the resistance to move the gospel forward. Because people have become so institutionalized and professionalized in the clergy. So that's my observation. I do believe that you're right. God loves all of us. He loves all his sheep, and he's going to have and maintain pastoral care for those persons and those congregations that will grow and thrive, and even some just maintain in that capacity with that full-time pastor. But there's a different event that takes place. The church is so truncated with its growth today that it's not moving forward in saving souls. It's doing a lot of transference, And that's where the apostolic gift and the evangelistic gift come into play. I believe wholeheartedly that's why God is raising up such men and women today. But I support those brothers. I have dear friends and sisters in the faith who I love dearly in their full-time capacity. But if they invite me, but if they invite me to lunch, you know, I'm not afraid to talk about it. All right, appreciate you, man. I do, and I appreciate your candor and your courage.
Hey, David, man. Hey, I appreciate your post, man. We all know some of the things you're talking about. We know those pastors who are territorial. We know the churches that are the Christian country club. We know all of those things, the churches that are professional churches. All right. But, you can be a pastor in any shape or form, or a minister. Don't even have to be a pastor to not be a good steward necessarily of what God's entrusted you with, and to abuse power and things like that, man. And I agree with everything that you had to say. Certainly, my previous comments weren't directed toward you or anyone in particular. But, I think it just comes back to, again, lifting up your eyes, seeing the opportunities before us, and being a good steward to what God's given us in whatever form that is, whether it be full-time ministry, Bivo, secular jobs, what have you. So anyway, man, I appreciate you, and I'm sure we'll hear some more comments from some of the other guys.
Hey, Wayman, check this out, man. And I'm sure others will chime in too. I invite them to. This is good. And I always knew I'd like you as soon as I heard your first post. But check this out. I was at a kid's birthday party this weekend, and I met a pastor, and we were sitting talking, and he didn't let on that he was a pastor for a while, but I kind of knew. But I sensed anyway. Anyway, I asked him how was the work going, how was his ministry coming along, and the brother said he'd been there 2 years. He's an older brother like myself. I think he's a little older than me, actually. He'd been there 2 years, and the church he was pastoring had 3 splits within its lifetime, and that's kind of common, right? Small church here. And anyway, I said, so how's it working? What are you doing? How's it working to grow the church? Because I'm thinking about moving right towards a church growth plan, right? Try to sell him trying to help him grow his church, right? And he said, he's spending a majority of his time going and doing face-to-face contacts with people who've left the church. I guess it's in its most recent, split, or maybe just second split. I don't know. I listened to him. I said, well, how's that working for you? He said, it's not. He said, it's just, it's very discouraging. They say, he gets a lot of lip service, and there's so many issues, deep-seated issues, that, conversation, him welcoming them back is just not going to resolve for them, right? And I said to him, well, let me ask you something, man. Did you ever think about going after the unsaved? Did you ever think about going after the ones who don't know Christ, who have not been introduced to Christ, who are living hungry for God's grace? And he actually sat up and he said, gosh, that's good. That's a good idea. I guess I never thought about that. Oh, my goodness. See, man, we all need help. I know I do. That's all, brother. Love you, man.
Hey, David. Hey, man, again, some great points, and great point about going after the unsaved. A lot of churches get into that maintenance mode, and I think you're referring to that kind of in your previous post, but just to throw out another reason why a lot of pastors are going Bivo is because a lot of the established churches are in that maintenance mode. A lot of the established churches, you've got people with some fire to do something, to preach the gospel, to reach people, and a lot of churches are just about maintaining. And, you have people that get raised up and trained up and have gifts, and there's no outlet for them. So I think that's another reason people do go Bivo, is because they are looking for that outlet to preach the gospel, to use their gifts and what have you. So anyway, man, appreciate you, my brother. Hey, David, again, appreciate you, man. I'll make this my last post on the subject. It's kind of a funny thing. I had a church that one time was calling me a Bivo pastor. I said, man, if y'all gonna call me Bivo, that means y'all got to pay me. So I was actually Novo or whatever, working for free. But man, look, you start talking about man, people that are doing things outside of their giftings and don't know their giftings and how to use their giftings. Man, that's my passion. That's what I do all day long, is try to help people figure out their giftings and find their lane and their role within the body, man. So I'm all about that. I could get off on that tangent all day, but for the sake of everybody else, I'll get off the topic here and just listen to what some of the other folks here have to say.
Hey, Ed, my reason for Bivo was we're just not gaining traction as quickly as I had hoped early on. But even over the last kind of year, God has really been working on my heart as far as just wanting to be more involved in the business world, potentially even fully engaged in that way. So for me, it's I've kind of over the last 6 to 7 months, I've gotten to a place where I want to be fully paid by a bivocational situation. So I don't want to take any money from the church or anything like that, so that in the future, if we're able to plant more churches, we can kind of have that model where we will equip guys who will equip people who have full-time occupations, full-time jobs with salary and benefits, and all that to start a Bible study, start a church, and they don't need to rely upon a major fundraising or anything like that. So that's kind of my reasoning behind that. It's kind of where I've come to at this whole point. So hope that helps. Thanks.
Hey, Ed, the reason why I'm bivocational is not necessarily out of necessity. I choose to be bivocational because I don't want to be a burden on my congregation. I've seen too many pastors that were full-time be a burden to the finances of the church, and really degrade the ministry, overall ministry of the church. And it seemed like the church was just assembling just so that we can support the pastor, his housing, his insurance, his retirement, and everything that was involved in supporting this pastor. And 95% of all the funds were going to supporting him, and the rest of the 5% was barely paying for the utilities of the building. So I've seen that many times, not just in the most recent church, but in multiple churches. And it's probably something specifically in the denomination I was in, but I don't want to do that to my church. I want the church to be free from the burden of taking care of my family and anything that comes our way for the church, whether up or down, that will not be a factor hindering the church or the ministry.
Ed, I totally agree with A. David and Aaron and Wyman on their main points there. I've been a full-time pastor, senior pastor, for about 2/3 of my ministry. I'm going on 26 years. I was bivocational at the beginning, and I am bivocational now, and everything in between has been full-time. As long as you're serving the Lord and you're using your gifts and you're in the will of God, that's the main thing. But I, over the last decade or so, kept having this growing conviction that I wanted to be financially independent from the church. That would require being bivocational, but I just had to work myself in that direction. And I told Pete when I started to be a consultant with him, that, my desire was to just get rid of my salary at the church altogether. And I am at that point right now. I do not draw a red cent from the church anymore. And it is a terrifying feeling. And it's also a very freeing feeling. It's great to know that any money that was coming to me is now going directly to those in the community that really need it. I'm the kind of guy that's right there in the middle of the sheep, and I'm right there, hearing the needs, knowing the needs, and now I know that my compensation is now going somewhere else, and I am at great peace with that. And though my consulting has been somewhat delayed by me, getting away from that dependence financially on the church, I like the way things are heading for me now. So would I ever be full-time again? I don't know. If that's the will of God, then that's the will of God. But I have encountered a lot of pride from full-time ministry, from other guys. I've encountered a lot of pride from bivocational guys as well. Kind of goes back to that, well, I'm of Paul and I'm of Apollos, and well, I'm of Christ, and, always trying to decide who's better than who. And, I guess there's just jerks at every level in every place, but I just want to be where the Lord wants me to be, doing what the Lord wants me to do. I know that sounds cliche, but also one thing that I've discovered is I believe it was perhaps Wyman or Aaron, I can't remember, who said, I just don't have the time to do everything. Well, when you're full time, everybody expects you to have the time to do everything, which stunts the growth of the body. And what I've discovered now is that I can concentrate on my gifts and utilize my gifts for the kingdom. And that sort of even forces the rest of the body to start doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be serving. I'm supposed to equip them for the work of the ministry. I'm not supposed to do it all. And that's a big failure of the established church. I planted our church about 5.5 years ago. We started out with about 7 families, and now we'll average almost 400, and it's so I go, I start out bivocational, I end up going full time, but still had that growing conviction that I needed to be just financially separated from the church so that the church could do the work of the ministry. I planted this church and feel led to start this church, to plant this church, simply because all the other churches that are in the area, in the surrounding area, really just wanted church to be for them and didn't want to do what it would really take to go out and reach the lost. This whole idea of country club and, all that, man, I've lived it. A lot of selfishness, just not wanting to have people in the building that aren't like everybody else. And so we've been very, very blessed, and God has caused us to be very effective in reaching people that nobody else has been able to reach. A lot of down and out folks, people who have lived very difficult lives, as well as, even some people who they've lived very difficult lives. They've had rough lives. The only difference is that they have a little more money than others. But I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling on, thinking about all of this, and really enjoy this discussion. But, like I said, the things that A. David and Aaron and Wyman were saying, I'm totally in line with as well.
Hey, Wyman and Ed, Wyman and A. David. Ed's the one whose fault this is. But I just wanted to throw in also my thoughts. I mentioned this a few months ago when this conversation came up, but I don't remember if A. David was in the group. I know you weren't, Wyman, but basically I'm totally in favor of there being full-time pastors. Some of the best and most influential pastors were not Bivo, but full-time, like Spurgeon, like Jesus, like Peter, like D.L. Moody. Like there's so many who gave up their Bivo jobs or were never Bivo to begin with to become full time, and that's when God really used them. So I don't think I understand what people mean when they say it gives them more clout, I guess, in the secular world and more reason for people to listen and stuff like that. But I by no means think this is a necessity. Whenever we get got in a box, it's like, well, this has to be the way you reach people. Then it's like, well, that's not how God works. But I do think that specifically in this group, most people here are probably called to Bible. I'm not saying that what we're called to this moment is the thing we're going to be called to 5 years from now. But a lot of people in this group are apostolic, and I think out of anyone in the fivefold ministry, if you kind of hold to that model and think about it that way, I think the apostolic gifting is by far the one that I think is meant to be Bivo in a sense. Whenever Paul talks about how, you guys should have given me money, but, I didn't want to take from you to, ruin whatever. It's clear that there's plenty of people in that church who are receiving money to, operate in their leadership capacity, would be teaching or shepherding or prophetic or whatever. And it seems like the apostolic gift is the one that tends to be Bivo, because the apostolic one is the one that's stretching, that's giving the growing pains to the church to expand. And that by necessity has to, not by necessity like it has to, but more often than not is Bivo, because they are stretching it. They're giving the growing pains of the business, just as a normal business, as it grows, people put in longer hours for a little bit before they can hire that next staff member. That's kind of how growing pains works. And I think apostolic people tend to lean towards Bible ministry because of that nature of not wanting to be tied down to, well, if I can't expand it because the church doesn't have funds, then I'm going to create my own funds. Then I'm going to help expand it. And then, once that next guy can go on full time, then I'm going to keep expanding again. And I think that tends to be the mentality that at least I see with the apostolic ministry. And honestly, that's coming from a guy who I honestly do not think I have that gifting. Personally, I see myself as a teacher, and that's, I wish I was more apostolic, wish I was more of these other things. But that's just the situation God put me in. But I think especially the apostolic gifting leans more towards Bivo because it's such a pushing forward, expanding gift, which also means that those who don't have that gift, it's totally great for them to be in full-time ministry, because that's more of their leaning, more of where God has made them to be. And yeah, it's sad that, like David said, there's the pastors who take that more as a territorial thing and like hey, you don't steal my people or whatever, and they don't see the gift that the apostolic guy brings to the pastor and to the shepherd and to the teacher. Although they do fight against each other, yes, you do have the money thing, but also keep in mind, Peyton talks all the time about how the fivefold ministry, they tend to fight amongst themselves just because, not fight, but they rub each other wrong because they see them doing as things that they wouldn't do themselves, and they see them valuing things that they don't value as much. And, it is a check and balance. And so don't grow discouraged, you guys, when there's people who are downplaying Bivo. It's not just because of money sometimes it's because they just don't see it the same way because they have different giftings. And also, like you said, Wyman, let's not play down the full-time pastors, because we see things differently and we have different giftings that emphasize those different things. So that's how I see it. And so basically the reason I'm Bivo is, yes, necessity. But I very much love the potential that Bivo brings, not only to conversations, but like I just said, trying to be more succinct for Ed's context of him using quotes and ideas is, I really like how it can be really an expanding influence in the church. That, when you're in those growing pains of you have maybe double the membership, but they're all new believers and they don't give all that much, and they're learning how to just be part of the body of Christ, you have the flexibility to jump in there with extra cash flow and extra help without the necessity of drawing from the church yourself. And so the Bible really helps with that. And not just to take with yourself personally, one of the things I look forward to with this consulting stuff is I want to build a business that I can hire other people, whether it be short-term interns or long-term staff from Redemption Church, our church. And and hire them to where I can supplement, 80% of their income. The church can supplement some, and they only work for me, 10, 15 hours a week, and they're able to do a lot more for the church. So I see Bivo not just as a short-term or a single-person thing, but if I can not just train other tent makers, but if I can just simply hire them for whatever term they are, whether our church or church plants we support, if I can help them become Bivo, but not have the difficult entry that you and I have by having to create our own businesses, if I can just hire them and help them be Bivo and give them, exceptional salaries for low time and just spread that wealth and that opportunity, then that's what I see with Bivo coming down the road and excited about.
Hey, let me just chime in on the why Bivo conversation. Even though I'm not a pastor, I talk to pastors all day long, and as you guys may or may not know, I do a lot of texting. So people come through one of my webinars, and I'll text them. My system automatically texts them, and if they respond, I get notified, and I enter into a conversation with them. And so I was in a conversation with this one pastor, and he was, full time, and he said, we preach that, you should be full time. The Bible's not what you should be, and if you do have to take a job, you don't do it in your own community, you do it in another community. And I just told him, I go, hey man, you know what's really cool? And I can't remember the exact context exactly of what I said, but I'm like, I'm going to be straight with you. You may not like the Church Planter podcast because, he even referred to it as the A plan versus the B plan. The A plan is full-time ministry. The B plan is bivocational ministry. And I go, you may not like the Church Planter podcast because our goal isn't, full-time ministry. In fact, what you call the A plan, we'd probably call the C plan. And we wouldn't tell people to go outside of their community to get a job. We'd totally tell them to get a job right in their community, be a pillar of the community. And I go, but here's the really cool thing. And this really relates to what Wyman was saying. God uses both. Like, there is no right or wrong way. Sometimes God uses someone who's bivocational. Sometimes God uses someone who's full-time ministry. And like Wyman was saying, he calls us to both. Like, maybe at this point in your life, he's called you to be Bivo. Maybe at another time, he'll call you to be full-time. You never know. But the cool thing about our God, he uses all of it. And what he's really looking for, and you guys all know this, I'm literally preaching to the choir. What he's looking for is the heart, right? That's what he's looking for. He's just looking for someone who wants to serve him. And he will use you no matter what that is. Maybe it's Bivo, maybe it's full-time. Kind of doesn't matter. And so, my response to that guy, I just kind of wanted him to understand, look, dude, we're more in favor of Bivo. You're more in favor of full-time. Doesn't matter, though. We're both right. God uses both. And that's kind of the cool thing.
That is absolutely true. And man, this is what I hate about full-time ministry snobbery. Some of the greatest servants I know are Bivo. Sunday, we were off, and we went to kind of a smaller, kind of out of the way church. Pastor was Bivo, but he has been struck with multiple sclerosis and is in a wheelchair. He takes his wheelchair up to the platform and just barely able to stand. He struggles to get on his feet and hangs on to the pulpit and preaches a wonderful message about the body of Christ and spiritual gifts. And, you just had to admire this guy and appreciate his heart to communicate the gospel. And I've been full-time most of my ministry. So, I've just seen both sides of that.
Man, I can't really add anything else to everything that's been said. I do want to say it's been awesome listening to everybody talk about this topic, because it's evident how much you guys love pastoring and love ministry and love being in your communities and love your people. It was just exciting to listen to that. That being said, I think I would drive home the point that Josh made about, people who, it's my daughter, sorry, people who are being controlled by those who pay their salary. I've got friends, not church planners, but several friends that have taken over long-standing established churches as new pastors. And that's one of the biggest buck-ups, where you can't change this, or you can't say that, or you can't do that because so-and-so, who's one of our biggest givers, doesn't want that or doesn't like that. And those type of things that oppose you, even if you feel like God is leading you in a direction. Whereas I sat under one pastor one time who earned his salary outside of the church. And I remember him saying one time, this is the direction we're going. And if you don't want to get behind it and you don't want to give to this, frankly, we need your seat. So he was a pretty straight shooter, but it was great to see him be able to operate in that liberty. He knew God had called him to something, and he was going to go for it. And those who were part of that body would be connected to it, would be in that vein, and would support it. And he didn't have to worry about anything else. Lastly, just having been on the mission field all the time I have, I'm going through something right now at my day job where people in another state in Florida are making national decisions about adding all this extra work for operations, Excel sheets and stuff. We got a new COO, and it's busy work that provides constantly changing information to them. It doesn't affect the bottom line, slows down productivity. And it's hard when you have people making financial decisions and ministry decisions that are disconnected from what you're doing. And we've built a lot of our church systems modeled after the world's systems. We made these CEO pastors and these networks, and it doesn't work for ministry. It builds that disconnect. And I had people when I was in Brazil as a missionary, back here in the States, making financial decisions, making job decisions, making healthcare decisions and insurance decisions. People who had never, ever set foot in the country, didn't speak the language, didn't know the culture, didn't know the law, nothing about it, were making decisions that affected my family. And in the time that missionaries and pastors, but missionaries I think of and I relate to because I was one, have to spend writing letters and begging for money and fundraising and traveling and not sharing the gospel, not sharing what the work is, a lot of times, but begging for their survival, begging for funds so they could stay in that work another year. It's just disheartening to see people have to do that, to beg for support and waste that time, to me, traveling and trying to raise that money when they could have spent that same energy working on some bivocational project, or if they had to support, stay in the ministry and stay in the field and keep doing what God called them to do. So those are some of the reasons that really touched my heart as a missionary, and having a lot of friends that are pastors. Why I think the bivocational route is necessary at times and a blessing. That's it, guys. Good night.
Man, I've been off this call all day. I've been assessing church planners in LA, and I miss the good stuff, man. So I'm kind of jealous. But my day started off today with leading my Uber driver to Christ. So that was kind of cool. In Burbank, when I was grumpy, I had gotten on a train at 4:53 a.m. in the morning to get there by 8. And so I was grumpy. I didn't feel like telling anybody about anything, more or less Jesus. So just proof that God does the heavy lifting. So hope you guys had a great day. Can't wait to get into this conversation. Pete kind of gave me a heads up to get on here and listen. So looking forward to digging in.
Being bivocational allows me to be out among people. And I find that a lot of times, as a pastor, my life can become very insular. But even if I were being able to be paid full time by my church, even if they were to provide for my full salary, et cetera, I still believe I would work outside of the church office 8 to 10 hours a week, because it keeps you among people and it keeps you relevant and involved in conversations that are taking place. And by the way, most people who lead people to the Lord, at least in my experience, are doing it in a context outside of church. And so sometimes you got to be outside of church.
Why Bivo? For me, it's Jay from Toronto, Canada. Part of it is to overcome a call or vow to poverty. Let me explain. This might take a little while, but I'll make it as short as I can. My parents are from South Korea, and my mom's a nurse, and my dad was a dairy scientist. And, worked very hard. We're very, very, very poor. My mom She lost both her siblings, one to drowning in a pool, the other one dying of some sort of illness, and they were so poor they couldn't pay for medication. So her brother ended up dying because of lack of money to get medication. My dad is one of 12 children, and he became the most responsible, even though he wasn't the eldest child. He had to go to the neighbor's farm, and in the middle of the night, in pitch black dark, there were no lights, and he took like a little bag, a satchel, if you will, in the middle of the night, and he would shovel or dig the dirt, the neighbors, the farmers' ground to get either watermelons or zucchinis or anything that he could find to bring food back home. That's the context that they lived in, where life was tough. They were very poor. They both ended up getting full rides, full scholarships. My dad went to Denmark for dairy science. My mom was in a nursing school in Busan. They ended up both immigrating to Toronto, Canada, or in the outskirts of Toronto, and their education didn't translate here. And obviously, because of that, they needed to find work. So they ended up working in factories, manual labor. The joke is, do you know that Koreans are everywhere in the world, and why is that? And the punchline is, well, where there is a corner, there is a corner store, and the Koreans will own that corner store. And the other thing is, Koreans are known to own dry cleaners. We wash your clothes for cheap. That's a Chinese accent, by the way. So yeah, dry cleaners and convenience stores or corner stores are owned by Koreans just because they need to make a living, and it's the easiest, low barrier job to get into. Fast forward to my call to ministry. I used to be a national sales manager for the largest bank in Canada, helping launch a Visa card that has done really well, helped oversee 1,300 branches across Canada, traveled and did training materials and quality assurance for call centers, et cetera, et cetera. And when I got the call to ministry, my parents basically said, you're taking a vow or a call to poverty. And as a pastor or a minister of the gospel, you shouldn't own a house. You shouldn't have a bank account. You shouldn't, and all these rules of what you shouldn't do, because, you know, as a minister, you should be humble, you should be poor, you should be meek, and all this, you know, ungodly, non-gospel centered theology. Fast forward today, I'm in ministry. It's been over 15 years. My house that I currently live in is actually kind of falling apart. The sunroom that I'm in right now has mold in it, and it needs to actually be completely ripped apart because of leaks, and like there's a lot of problems with the house. It's a 60-year-old house. The car before this one, I had a 1993 Camry, so that's 24 years young. So life is not easy as a person in ministry, as you all know. Now I have a newer 2004 van. Woohoo! No, honestly, I'm very grateful for it. I give praise and thanks for it. Raising support for me it's almost been 2 years. It's been very difficult. It's time consuming. And in 2 years, I still haven't raised all my support, let alone my ministry budget to travel across Canada, to equip the churches, to reach lost people. So I can't remember who said it just recently before, but man, it's like 2 years and I haven't been able to really get to the work of ministry in the way that I want to. I mean, that's precious time with souls being lost, you know, every second, every day, every week, every month, every year. And so that's been a real just crushing my spirit dilemma with the financial aspect of it. And I'm still raising support. I do have a passion. I do have a call and gift, and I'm a reluctant and accidental evangelist. But being Bivo, why Bivo? Well, it allows me to be in connection with pre-Christians, people who will come to Christ, because I know they will by faith. And I'd say, in fact, about over 90% of the people that I have helped lead to Jesus or help others be equipped to lead Jesus have been outside of the church context. What I mean by that is Sunday gatherings, house church, or small group context has been all outside of that, 90% or more. I've led people to Christ on the golf course. I've led people to Christ on airplanes, just like Peyton had led the Uber driver. I've led homeless people to Christ on street corners, on multiple university campuses. I've led people to Christ in ICU wards in the hospital several times, actually. I'm sure we can make a podcast of that. people, with liver failure, quadruple bypass, cancer, et cetera, et cetera. Man, that reminds me, I gotta write this accidental evangelist book, stories of God moving. And yeah, Pete, I think it'd be awesome for you to use this Bible material for a podcast or a CD. I need Bible for my family. I need the financial security and the income flow so that I can get out and equip the churches to reach the lost, especially those that are church planners like myself previously, who don't have a budget or have very little money, and offer them free consultation if possible, so that we can reach more people for Christ with the gospel. And Bible income will allow me to be free from these financial constraints. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amen.
Hey, good evening, everyone. It's so much later than I would ever normally chime in on Voxer, but just was tying up some things. I'm normally way crashed by now, but just wanted to get everybody's input into my notes here as I prepare this video for tomorrow. And I just wanted to chime in. I know some of y'all on the West Coast, it's a little bit earlier here. East Coast folks, I'm sorry. I hope your phone's not buzzing and annoying you like sometimes it does me, but I just have deeply appreciated it. Travis, your comment was hilarious. I really had no intention of stirring up such a long, in-depth, passionate conversation, but I'm glad I did. And Pete, run with it. I'm sure you will. So let us know when that podcast is. That would be great. I've just been really digging into this. I'm trying to find my niche, if you will. So Travis and I have been going back and forth. We're starting this Wedding Pastors Network and hoping that goes real well. And I've just been thinking, okay, what's next beyond that? Where do I go? And I feel like this bivocational area is such a growing passion of mine. I do want to be clear when I threw the question out. I know that there was some back and forth about bivocational or not. And I didn't mean to bring that up in any possible way. So I absolutely agree with all of you who have said, it's wherever God leads you. I probably would say that I want to be full time. I would love that. I don't see that in my future. And the longer that I go and hopefully the more money I can make with my business or businesses, on the other hand, I hope I don't ever have to take a penny. But my biggest influences right now, I mean, outside of this circle, obviously Pete is huge, and Peyton, and many of you. But I mean, my mentors are all full-time, guys, and so to me, that's a moot point. So I just want to clarify that. I didn't mean to stir that up, and my question was in no way inferring that like bivocational is the better way or anything like that. Just simply that I want to address the benefits of it, and I'm glad that some of this came up, some of the push, because I want to state that clearly in my video and in the blog that I'm going to write. I want to state that I'm not suggesting that Bivo is better, period, or it's right for everyone. It's just like with the consulting or with being a wedding pastor. It's not right for everybody, but it could be awesome for many. And so that's definitely the bottom line for me. So however God leads, there's just a million and one ways. And Travis, unbelievable, man, that being 20, I can't believe you're 25. I'm not sure that you're being totally honest about that. But anyway, your wisdom at your age, I know I've told you this privately, but I wish that I was 25 in the position that you're in, and your wisdom far exceeds your experience. And I'm so thankful for you. I think you're entirely right in the sense that those that have that kind of apostolic, gifting, like for me, I feel like I'm constantly starting stuff and I frustrate, teachers and prophets in particular. So anyway, just really blessed to have this conversation with you all. I've got 12 testimonies. I'm going to try to kind of collate them into a couple different topics. The topic of my video or whatever is 10 reasons why bivocational pastoring and church planting is a great option and how you can succeed in it. So I got, at least 10, but I'm going to try to narrow that down tomorrow morning. So again, if any of you are on 12 o'clock noon tomorrow Eastern Standard Time, you want to jump on Facebook Live with me, and would love your feedback. And we'll just continue the conversation and let God use us in some amazing ways. So I hope y'all have a great rest. Good night, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Well, everyone, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the Church Planter Podcast. We're going to go ahead and just cut it out right here. There's a lot more great stuff that happens in the Bivo Inner Circle. I'd highly, highly, highly recommend, if you ever get a chance, get into the Bivo Inner Circle. Head on over to bivoinnercircle.com. Check it out. See what we're doing. And I'm telling you guys, it is mind blowing. The ministry insight you're going to get, the income making side. I mean, that's really what started the whole thing was, hey, let's show these guys how I personally make money. Because I think if they took it and did it, they would actually make the money that they need to make without having to, as I say it, sell their soul to the company store. And they could still spend the time with their family that they need to spend. So anyway, go ahead and head on over to bivoinnercircle.com, and we will talk to you later. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for joining us for another weekly episode of the Church Planter Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. We'd love to hear your comments on this episode of the Church Planter Podcast. Visit us online and let us know what you thought at churchplanterpodcast.com. If you subscribe to us via iTunes and have enjoyed the podcast, leave us a positive review. The more positive reviews we receive in iTunes, the more iTunes will promote us to other church planners who would benefit from this show. This podcast is brought to you by the Church Planter Magazine, which is available in the iTunes newsstand or online via churchplantermagazine.com.